Nick Coffey, you are a longtime federal prosecutor running for Oklahoma Attorney General as a Democrat.
Yes,
First of
sir.
all, why did you decide to run? And what is it that you would want to achieve for Oklahomans as Attorney General?
Sure. So first off, Dion, thank you for having me. Thanks for reaching out. Happy to be here. Um, so, like you said, I was a federal prosecutor for several years. Like the majority of my legal career has been spent in the U.S. Attorney's Office. There I did kind of like three buckets of cases. I did drug and money laundering cases, right? But I did first off, I did cases investigating violent prison gangs, so gangs operating behind within DOC that are still coordinating. We get more into this, still coordinating major drug trafficking with Mexican cartels. I investigated and prosecuted the illegal Chinese marijuana grows popping up across the state, and then also Mexican cartel groups. Um, of course, they were operating here in Oklahoma, taking orders from their bosses in Mexico, right? And so, as a federal prosecutor, right? I mean, the job, Dion, is you're holding people accountable. You're trying to make sure that everybody's treated fairly and equally under the law. Um, and when I looked at, frankly, a lot of the conduct, both what I would characterize as unethical and also just illegal and in violation of state statutes that I was seeing among a lot of our state officials.
Hmm.
Um, Dion, it bothered me. I mean, it bothered me. I'm just like you. I was a federal prosecutor, just a normal guy going to do my job, and I'm reading about state officials that are breaking the law, and it didn't seem to me like anybody was actually willing to hold them accountable. And it seemed to me like we are having two different standards of justice for people that are in the legislature, people that are in the executive branch. And that bothered me, right? Because there's no the standard of justice that I'm applying in federal court to every single person that is indicted, right? There's no difference. And so why are we expecting less of our elected representatives, right? I have no experience in politics. I've never been elected. I've not been in a legislature. And so I thought, particularly this time in our state where I think we are performing pretty poorly in all kinds of areas that the AG, right, does not have direct control over. But I think that the first step for us as a state in turning the corner and actually addressing many of the problems that we're facing, crime rates, recidivism, health outcomes or education outcomes. I think actually having an attorney general that holds other officials accountable to make sure that they're working for the people and not advancing their own interests, that was very important to me. And so, yes, I made the decision to leave a job that I really, really enjoyed at the U.S. Attorney's Office as a federal prosecutor. I left. I'm now a part-time attorney at Crow and Dunleavy, and obviously I had to leave Dion so that I could launch this campaign. You cannot run for office as a federal prosecutor under DOJ regulations, and so that's what brought me here. I've buckets of things I want to focus on. I'm happy to get in the weeds of those with you, but they revolve around crime, corruption, and our state's kids. But anyway, that is what brought me to this position. I'm excited. I think that Oklahomans are looking for new leaders in the state. I don't think that the political elites have served the state well, frankly. And I'm trying to meet the moment.
Hmm. Trying to meet the moment. Well, we're definitely in a precarious moment. We have a state superintendent, a former state superintendent who left us high and dry with chaos, confusion, and abysmal test scores. We have a governor who has prioritized, I guess what he deems his battle against tribal nations instead of taking time to feed low-income families with emergency funds. And like you said, we do have plenty of elected officials over the last recent years who have been involved in scandals or criminal activity, who've been arrested. convicted. So I guess as a Democrat, you're also a fifth generation Oklahoman. What is it about maybe how you were raised that makes you feel prepared for this role?
Um, so yeah, fifth generation Oklahoman. Look, I took a lot, I guess going all the way to the back, I took a lot from both sets of grandparents. My granddad on my mom's side was the U.S. attorney in Tulsa, appointed by John F. Kennedy. He was the youngest in the nation at the time. Um, and he continued after he was, he went to private practice after he was U.S. attorney under Kennedy and then LBJ. The stories he told Dion, like he got to play football on the White House lawn. It was all the U.S. attorneys that had been basically convened in Washington versus a bunch of people that were working for the Department of Justice at the time, right? So they had touch football game. My granddad played football at OU. He was on one of the national championship teams. Um,
Hmm.
so I took a commitment to public service, right? I think that our state would be a lot better off, and frankly, our country would be a lot better off if everybody at some point did something in public service, the nonprofit sector, something to give back to their communities. That was important to me to do something, frankly, to serve my community and my state, but also in a way, I always felt like I was following my granddad's footsteps. That was the first thing. On the other side, my dad's side of the family is from Okarche, Oklahoma. They are farmers. They raise wheat and cattle. And my granddad, Red Coffey, that was his nickname. He had the red hair, so he went by Red Coffey for short. Um, he, Dion, until he passed away a few years ago, he was out at the farm every single day. He's almost 85, right? And it didn't matter if it was 15 degrees outside, he was out there. And so, really, the value of hard work came from him. There's a reason the U.S. Attorney's Office and now my office at my law firm, I keep a photo of my granddad Red Coffey there because it reminds me that, look, all of us work long hours. You need to love what you do and enjoy what you do, get fulfillment from it. But sometimes we all know that you think this is kind of grind.
Yeah.
But then I remember, right, that you think this is a grind. You're sitting at a desk, and Red Coffee is out there working when it's 110 degrees or when it's 10 degrees outside. Um, so those were two examples for me growing up. And then, look, I grew up in the Catholic school system in Oklahoma City. Um, really the Catholic school system, it taught me a sense of respect and community. We respected our teachers. We valued giving back to the community. We do things among my small Catholic school, go to homeless shelters, serve lunch. I do that with my family through the church. And so I think all of that really sort of instilled an importance in, I think, faith and family and hard work. All of that, which I think a lot of us pull those notions from different areas, but at least for me, that's what sort of set me on the path to be a lawyer and really just fight for what's right, fight for community.
See. And you want to now be a fighter for the entire state of Oklahoma as the top law enforcement official. Um, if elected, I know that there were three main key areas you had mentioned you wanted to tackle. Can you talk about what are those areas that Oklahomans can expect you to handle as Attorney General?
So my three areas are kids, crime, and corruption. And I'm going to, in no level of importance, just because this is on my mind, given the start of our conversation, the corruption angle. I think our state has a big problem with corruption. I call it grifting, right? Serving the people in order to line your own pockets, in order to benefit your outside business interests. That is a problem. And I think it's a problem because when you've got state officials that are working for their own interests. They're not working for our interests. And when they're not working for our interests, they're not addressing the many problems Oklahoma faces, right? Dion, I see Governor Stitt vetoing an anti-corruption bill that would have required additional disclosure obligations for state officers and other ethics trainings. I see the Attorney General giving sweetheart deals to people like Terry O'Donnell and Ty Burns in the legislature. which again makes me think there are two different standards of justice being promoted. Um, I see recently Stephen Harp, the former director of the Department of Corrections, who, in clear violation of the state's revolving door statute, gives a, with his position as head of DOC, gives $1 million contract to an artificial intelligence company, and then goes and works for that same company within the cooling off period, right? Only a few months later. And when I don't see public officials calling that conduct out, I think it's not only bad because they're failing to service as people, but I think it frankly causes apathy
Mhm.
among the populace, and they think that nothing's ever going to change. And so, first and foremost, I want to be an attorney general that calls out and stops legal and ethical conduct. I mean, there's a lot that our state officials could have done about Ryan Walters.
Mhm.
Uh, and sternly worded press releases and wagging the finger is clearly was not going to do the job. So I want, first and foremost, I want people to know that I'm not from the political elite. I do not hobnob with those at the Capitol. I don't know any of them. I think Oklahomans want an attorney general that's going to get in there and be independent and not bring politics into the AG's office. So that's the first and the biggest thing, Dion.
Okay. And so when it comes to uh, crime, um, what do you see as the areas that are most crucial to address? I know the transnational gangs, of course, are definitely up there.
Yes. So the first thing, the illegal Chinese marijuana grows, we've made significant. I will give AG Drummond credit on this. And I was the first AUSA, first federal prosecutor in the Oklahoma City office to actually start tackling these.
Mm.
I realized talking to agents that this was a problem, right? Because you had agents talking about they're going out on these marijuana farms and they're finding evidence of labor trafficking and sex trafficking, ketamine trafficking. You know, you're hearing basically that these farms are sucking up resources from rural Oklahoma, lights and electricity.
Mm.
And I was the first one. I picked up the phone and called my DEA, one of the supervisors, said, "Hey, who's working on these cases? I want to investigate those." And so I did a series of cases targeting those grows. And the AG's office has also played a hand in prosecuting those. But and they've made progress, Dion. But I mean, we've got to pursue criminal forfeiture against these groups because the only way to actually dismantle them such that they're no longer able to launder their money through these grows, send it back to New York, send it to China, is by using criminal forfeiture to take that piece of land that they bought for $1 million in cash, right? That's big because also what that's going to do, Dion, it's going to free up law enforcement to tackle other problems in the state. Um, the second thing in the crime bucket that's concerning me is that, look, the legislature does not talk about this because they do not want to acknowledge that basically they don't have their house in order. Go talk to any DEA, FBI, or OBN agent. All of the drug trafficking in Oklahoma, which of course is coming from Mexico, no one's debating that, but most of the drug trafficking is being coordinated between the heads of violent prison gangs, the Irish mob, the Universal Aryan Brotherhood, and the Serranos in our state prisons, right? And their leaders have. Most people don't know this. I mean, you should have seen. We had a federal jury trial targeting the Irish mob in 2021, and to explain this to the jurors, you can see the look on their face that like this is amazing. You've got people with contraband cell phones in prison that are contacting the bosses in Mexico, coordinating these massive drug deals, bringing methamphetamine and fentanyl into the state. Um, and the reason that I think this is so important is because I saw at the U.S. Attorney's Office that all of these, I think a lot of problems we have in Oklahoma with recidivism, right? People falling back into the criminal justice system because we haven't given them help in terms of addiction treatment, homelessness, sorry, um, petty crime rates. All of this, I think, is impacted significantly by the amount of drugs that are coming into our state. And it would seem to me that the most logical way, you're never going to be able to stop as Oklahoma Attorney General, any state's Attorney General, right? The flow from Mexico. That is obviously outside of our jurisdiction. There are things the US government has got to do to put pressure on Mexico to stem that. But it seems like here at home, what we can do is ensure that the largest customer base, the prison gangs, is drying up, and that is going to have a huge impact on our addiction rates, our homelessness rates, other crime rates. And so I feel passionately that if you actually want to address some of the socioeconomic problems that our state's facing, we got to get our DOC house in order.
So speaking of DLC, I
Mm-hmm.
do want to ask you about this most recent death penalty case when it comes to Tremaine Wood. We have an attorney general, Gitner Drummond, who pushed for his execution despite um, his brother already admitting, confessing to being the killer. But under Oklahoma's felony murder law, prosecutors don't have to prove you were the, person who committed the act as long as you participated in a crime leading to a death.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you do differently as a G if you were if a case like Tremaine's came across your desk?
Well, let me start off by saying that I am grateful that Governor Stitt made the right decision. Um, Frankly, it concerns me that we have an AG that recommended against clemency, and let me tell you why. From what I know about the case, right, I think there are significant concerns about ineffective assistance of counsel. My understanding is that, and I don't even think all of this is, I don't think I'm saying anything that's really in dispute. His defense counsel at the time himself was dealing with addiction. Look, this is a high stakes pressure game, a jury trial. If you've got a defense counsel on drugs, they can't do their job very well. So that's one is concerning. Um, Two, in federal court, when we go to sentencing, one of the things that the judge has to ensure is there aren't what the federal statute refers to as unwarranted sentencing disparities. Basically, are you treating defendants that did the same thing equally? Right. And so the idea that we have Tremaine Wood, who was sentenced to death, given the death penalty, but his co defendant, who actually did the murder, did not receive the death penalty, that is highly concerning. I don't know all the procedural and procedural niceties below for how that happened. My understanding could have been a different judge or a different ADA on the case, but that's no excuse, right? And so, look, I can't get inside Governor Stitt's head, but I've got to think that that is the reason that he decided to grant clemency. Look, in a state where the death penalty is still the law, I mean, the AG can't come in and change the law, right? But what the AG can and should do is make sure that every single application for clemency, we are looking at that record below with a very close eye towards prosecutorial misconduct, ineffective assistance of counsel, like it sounds like was here with Tremaine Wood, and also unwarranted sentencing disparities. Right? Are they getting? Is the defendant, the person applying for clemency, was he treated fairly and equally in relation to his co-defendants? That has to be the role of the attorney general. And frankly, I mean, as a federal prosecutor, I handled, for the most part, I handled my own appeals. So I'd go up to the 10th Circuit in Denver and defend the record below. And you've got to be able to parse a trial record to make those determinations. It's something I think I'm well suited to do. One other point on Tremaine Wood that's bothering me. My understanding is that one of the reasons the AG did not recommend clemency was that Tremaine Wood's conduct in prison, including having contraband cell phones, allegedly ordering violence against other inmates. Okay, fine, but like, why that observation and finding is playing a role in recommending whether someone should be off death row. I don't see how that has any basis in deciding whether to grant clemency and take the death penalty off the table. If your argument is that Tremaine Wood has been entirely, reformed and is ready to reenter society, then I think that's fair game. But to inject that into a conversation about whether he should be taken off death row, I mean, I wouldn't do that.
And finally, kids. It's one of those issues that we all know is there, uh, but it's not something that we protest about very often. It's one of those issues that we rely on our law enforcement to handle, right? When it comes to child predators, or especially online child predators. Um, can you talk about, uh, if elected as Attorney General, how you would combat that here in Oklahoma?
So I'm glad you went there because in terms of the AG's prerogative, right, to keep families safe. Look, we have got to, the AG should be aggressively litigating cases against social media companies and gaming platforms and the like, right, that are opening children up to, or I should say, aren't putting appropriate safeguards in place in order to protect kids. Companies that know, right, that a child is going to access their platform in whatever form or fashion. Um, I think it's incumbent upon those companies to make sure appropriate safeguards are in place, and it's incumbent upon the attorney general to take action, legal action, when they don't. Because the reality is that now, when a child walks out the front door, he's at just as much of risk as he or she is when they're back in their bedroom on their phone, tablet, computer, whatever it may be. And so I think you've got to use the power of the AG's office to ensure that that online predators are not accessing our kids through social media platforms. That's a big picture. Down the line, right? I think establishing task force and working some units out of the AG's office to address criminal conspiracies involving online predators, I think, is a good use of the AG's you know investigative unit. So yeah, those are things that I want to be focused on in particular because the AG, I mean, you're the attorney for the people, right? You need to be protecting families first and foremost. So I'll be laser focused on that. Also, Dion, and what else is on my mind when it comes to kids? Obviously, we need to make sure. I have no reason to think that the next state superintendent will repeat what Ryan Walters did. But I think it's incumbent upon, look, when you have a state superintendent that's violating state statute, like, I mean, he created this ideology test like out of thin air. Like, there's no basis in statute for him to do that. There was none. Um, Look, I would have taken legal action regarding that. And we'll leave to the side all the other ethics concerns and misspending of taxpayer dollars for a moment. But yeah, there was plenty that should have concerned the AG's office, and I think did to some extent with Ryan Walters. The last thing that's on my mind with kids, Dion, is it seems to me that there have been a significant amount of just talking to my attorney friends and following the news, sexual abuse cases out of school districts across the state, not just in metropolitan areas. Um, I think that the AG's office needs to make that a prerogative because the AG again needs to do what they don't set education and policy, right? But they can do everything. They should do everything they can, right, to make sure that when kids go to school, they're safe.
I mean, absolutely. And a lot of times, those teachers are the adults in their lives that they see the most throughout the day. Um, I really appreciate you sharing your perspective and your priorities. So, I mean, realistically, as a Democrat running for a statewide office in Oklahoma, what is your strategy to get past that two-party mentality of, blue no matter who, or red, red. I don't know if there's a red rhyme phrase, but kind of, I'm just going to check the box for whatever Republicans on the ticket. How do you get
Here's
past that?
Yeah, how do you get past the fact that there are more Republicans than Democrats? Well, one, I'm going to win independents. I'm going to win independents overwhelmingly, and the number of independents in Oklahoma is growing and it's growing rapidly. Um, I'm going to win moderate Republicans. I'm confident
Mm.
because at the end of the day, particularly with the prerogative of the attorney general to protect families, protect communities, protect kids, and also ensuring that crimes go prosecuted and victims don't go ignored. regardless of your political stripe, I think you want someone that has been a prosecutor in that role. And again, when people, I am not just pro prosecutor. Me in the U.S. Attorney's Office, I had as many conversations. A lot of the conversations we had with agents were how to protect people's rights because they are constantly making sure they don't take action a lot of time without calling us. I mean, I would say as a federal prosecutor, in a lot of ways, I was an armchair quarterback because
Mm.
you have agents in the field that were investigating these cartel groups, but they still have rights. And so figuring out, when is a search warrant necessary? You're in the field and a drug hits on a car or a drug dog hits on a car or something. These are conversations, and what do you do next, right? These are conversations we had consistently to make sure we're respecting people's rights. I say all that because I think regardless of political stripe, Oklahomans are going to want someone that's actually been a prosecutor in that role. Not somebody that is a professed businessman, not somebody that hasn't never tried a jury trial, not somebody that is basically spent their career in the legislature and is talking in front of TV cameras instead of juries. I don't think anything I'm saying here, from certain criminal justice initiatives to prioritizing the investigation of certain crimes, protecting kids. I don't think anything I'm saying here is particularly partisan. Look, I think this is a long race, and we'll see what my opponents do. But I think they're going to attempt to distract with all kinds of other issues. I am here to talk about issues that are actually affecting Oklahomans, how we can more smartly and efficiently address crime, frankly, so we can free up the agents from going to rural Oklahoma to knock down the 100th marijuana grow in the third quarter of 2025 so that they can actually focus on other crimes that are affecting people. And I think it's a winning message. And I think that when people consider that it's the job of the Attorney General to keep people safe, I think they're going to make the right decision at the ballot box.
Fair enough. And speaking of the ballot box, when can people vote for you?
Next November. So we've got a whole another year. Yeah. So many of my friends said, when's the election? Is it in a month or so? I was like, no, we got a year. So November of 2026, it will be on the same ballot as all the statewide offices, governor, lieutenant governor, auditor, all of them, right? And so we got another year in front of us, and we will be working the state, introducing me to people across the state, helping spread the message, and hopefully building excitement, momentum for this campaign.
All right. Well, Nick Coffey, candidate, Democratic candidate for Oklahoma Attorney General, thank you so much for coming on In Depth with Dion.
Dion, thank you very much. Talk soon.